You're about to enter a world few ever see. A world where what you think is music hides a darker rhythm, where melodies don't just move your feet, but whisper to your mind. Is the music industry a harmless mix of glitz and glamour, or rather a portal to occult rituals, mind control experiments, and deep rooted social engineering? Let's turn up the volume here on Things Visible and Invisible. Mark Devlin is a UK-based club and radio DJ, music journalist and author. In 2010, he underwent a transformative awakening that led him to dig deeper into the hidden reality of the mainstream music industry. As an author, he's best known for his multi-volume series Musical Truth, where he investigates hidden agendas and the true nature of the corporate music machine. And he joins me down the line from his home in England. Mark, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Hey, Sean, good to be with you.
Mark, I've been following your work for some time, and it intrigues me and fascinates me in equal measure. The music industry has shall we say, a good PR. People think of it as something very glamorous, something in various ways, either wholesome or something which is cutting edge or in a sort of performative way. But most people see it as pure entertainment of one form or another. You, however, would probably disagree and would probably, to use an expression I think the Beatles said, open people's mind and drift downstream. So where would you like to start on this magical mystery tour?
Well, certainly entertainment, popular culture, and therefore music offer the perfect vehicles through which to get things like mass mind control and social engineering agendas achieved, because nobody's expecting to have their worldview shaped and molded for them and their belief systems and their values shaped and molded for them when they think they're just unwinding from a long day at work and chilling out to a favorite album or going to see a favorite band perform or watching a favorite movie or TV show. But this is when the mind is wide open for manipulation, because where things like symbolism get targeted is at the subconscious mind in its subliminal state. And the subconscious mind gets engaged when we're relaxed, when we're chilled, when we're switched off from conscious thought. And that's why entertainment, if you are a satanic psychopath, for example, who wants to control large numbers of people, that's where it comes in as the perfect way to get all this stuff done. And prior to probably 18 years ago, at this time of year, you would have found me as a DJ, and I would have a whole bunch of gigs in the diary leading up to Christmas and New Year. And all I'd be thinking about is parties, tunes, going to clubs, traveling, rocking a crowd. That was all that was important to me. But things got to the stage just over 15 years ago, I guess, where I came to realize that the world is nothing like we've spent our entire lives being trained to think that it is. And at its most extreme form, that expresses itself in the form of government and political systems. And you come to realize that there's a hierarchy there's a pyramid of power, there are secret society groups and networks which control these institutions. And that filters out into all other areas of organized society and our regular daily lives. So you find it in the world of academia, universities, colleges, schools. You find it in the world of medicine. You find it in big business and the tech industries. You find it in the mainstream media and what gets told to us through the evening news and newspapers and such. And if you are prepared to accept that this is the case, and I got to that stage, then you would be very naive to assume that the same forces and powers that have managed to get all these other institutions in their grip and under their control would have passed up the opportunities that entertainment, popular culture, music offer to push their agendas and get society driven in the directions that they want. And of course, this is not the case. And I came to realize this begrudgingly all those years ago. And what I saw was many researchers who exposed the way this dynamic plays out in the world of politics and big business and such, but very few that were joining the dots to demonstrate how it pervades the music industry. So I kind of saw a vacancy there, and nobody else was doing this job, and I stupidly volunteered myself for it, and it became my life. And this is what I've been doing full time for the past who knows how many years anymore.
Now, you've said an awful lot in that opening discourse, Mark. I understand we've had people on this show who have talked a lot about military-industrial complexes, about big tech, et cetera, and how these can be manipulated, et cetera. We've had some people on talking about the music industry, often talking from a spiritual angle about it, that somehow it's been manipulated by forces not of this world, in a sense. However, your thesis is probably the most intricate in regard to this, because what you're talking about here is not just a different way of looking at the entertainment industry, and in particular the music industry, but a different way of looking at the world around us. Would that be a fair summation of where your thesis, where your philosophy is taking us?
Yeah, it's everything. It's all of the above. If you are a researcher that's going to look into the true nature of what goes on in this world, but you're going to remain rooted in the conspiratorial, so to speak. So the detail, the nuts and the bolts, the names, the places, the detail, the documents, certainly you're going to get a very good handle on who really runs things and what these different ways of life are really used for. But if you're not going to look at the spiritual, esoteric, otherworldly aspect of it, you're going to be missing large parts of the picture. And the opposite is also true. So you get people that are very fixated on the spiritual, metaphysical, paranormal side of things, but they might not pay enough attention to the detail of how all this stuff gets done. So I think my work weaves together those two very broad subject areas. And over the course of the 4 books that I've written over 10 years and the hundreds of talks and podcasts that I've given, I think I bring together these different strands, and I do my very best job in joining the dots and showing how everything is connected. So you have music's military and mind control connections. So this is the title of one of my long-running talks. And this is where I demonstrate how the music industry was, in its early days, based upon the military-industrial complex. So the very early record labels through which big names like Elvis Presley, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, these sort of groups, Pink Floyd, David Bowie, we're talking labels like RCA, Decca, Parlophone, EMI. All of them began life with military uses. So RCA, for example, is the Radio Corporation of America, and it was developed directly out of the US Navy. And it's the same story with EMI in Britain and those other labels that I mentioned. So prior to becoming record labels and releasing music by these very big names in the early days of rock and roll, they were concerned with things like sonar, radar systems, different radio technologies, different ways of manipulating and delivering sound, all for military applications. So this is the first red flag in that these organizations morphed into entertainment out of purely military usage. And then you've got mind control, because unfortunately, wherever you find expressions of the military and military intelligence operations such as MI5, MI6, the CIA, and there are endless connections between these organizations and some of the very biggest music artists out there. And again, I demonstrate and detail many of these in my work. You often find the presence of trauma-based mind control. So this is things like MK Ultra, this very far-reaching mind control program coming through those nice folks at the CIA, and the different expressions and derivatives of that. And then, unfortunately, where you find mind control, you often find Satanism and other dark occult practices and ritualistic elements to the way things get done. That's everywhere in popular music. It shouldn't be. There should be no such connections whatsoever, but they just go on endlessly. And then where you find that, you often find other very unsavory elements, such as words beginning with P. So I'd love it to be some other way, and I'd love to have a different message for people, but I'm just reporting on what I've found through having done this job full time for a great number of years. And it was very difficult for me early on because I had to let go a lot of personal heroes. And I think this is why people find this whole subject area just so difficult to grasp and so unsettling, so uncomfortable. Because if you are prepared to accept that the entire industry is not run by particularly nice people, then that inevitably filters down into some of your favorite bands and your favorite artists. And you have to ask yourself honestly, well, what do these people know? What is it they're a part of? What is it they're being used for? And that can lead you into some very unsettling areas. But you either want the truth or you don't. You're either prepared to go with it or you're not. You're either prepared to accept the evidence or you're not. It's one thing or the other. And I'm merely a messenger. I'm sharing my research and my information, which has been diligently put together over a long period of time, and it's up to people what they do with it. But there's no shortage of information out there, and there's no shortage of citations, resources, and references either, because I provide all of those, lest I be accused of pulling this stuff out of the ether.
Well, we're going to get into all of that, Mark. You've certainly set it up wonderfully. But I have a question, because I think we need to set the parameters here a little bit. You talked about the origins of some of the record companies and their links to the military. We're expecting, that popular music, rock and roll, rock music as it became, the way people have very much linked with some of the ideas that you're about to discuss with us. However, my question is this: was it ever thus? Was there as much interest in controlling the masses in popular music or popular entertainment, say 100 years ago at the start of motion pictures, or popular music from the 30s and 40s? Or is this something which really comes about post-World War II with the growth of the military-industrial complex on both sides of the Atlantic?
It certainly got stepped up post-World War II. And in my research, I take as a starting point 1955, because you got to start somewhere. If I was going to take the entirety of known human history, I'd tie myself up for several lifetimes. So my starting point is 1955, and I begin with the advent of rock and roll, the rock and roll era. So 1955 is the year that Bill Haley and his Comets came out with Rock Around the Clock. That was quite a revolutionary song because it was very different to the music that had gone before in a very sort of austere, staid, rather grey post-war era. Suddenly there was this explosion of colour and vitality and youthful energy at that point in history. And then the following year, you had the emergence of Elvis Presley, and then artists like Buddy Holly and Little Richard and Chuck Berry and all these early rock and roll pioneers. So I start there, and it's very clear to see what the agendas were from the 1950s onwards. That's not to say that there wasn't manipulation prior to that point. And I think, again, it would be quite naive to assume that there hadn't been. If we think back to the classical music era, or the very high point of that genre, I think we would have to conclude that the very biggest names that we've all heard of, the composers of all the music that was played at the time and who we still study today, would have been selected in very much the same way as today's pop music stars are. So many of them would have been Freemasons. Many of them would have come out of important aristocratic bloodline families. And these are the same methods of selection for choosing many of today's megastars. Often it's down to family bloodlines. It's down to genealogy, ancestry. It's what families these people have been born into, because new generations of the same families that have been deemed important are put to use in influential, prominent roles in society. So 300 years ago, they might have been put out there as a composer of classical music. These days, they might be put out there as a pop star or a producer or a rapper or any other role which gets them into the minds of large numbers of people. It applies to film stars and TV presenters just as much as musicians. But the manipulation would surely have been there for a very long time before my starting point. I just leave the work prior to 1955 to somebody else because I've kind of got my hands full with the past 70 years.
Okay, so let's take 1955. You're not the first guest we've had who's also marked 1955 as the epoch-changing year. Right. Let's take your idea around Bloodlines and the selection of people to front this idea that you have. Let's take somebody that we all know, or we all think we know, and that is Elvis Presley. Now, my understanding of Elvis is that he came from a very poor background, had very little education, formal education, though was a very intelligent man, obviously, but had a wonderful gift. And through the arts of Colonel Tom Parker, managed to get a bit of a headwind in terms of the South, and then went national on television. And because of television and the global reach of television in the United States, became a huge star very, very quickly. That's the kind of official version. The rest we know, the movies and the Vegas and it all ending in a rather sad way. But that the official version, Mark, is this, that he was sort of an American hero, a rags to riches story, a man with lots of talent who just happened to hit the zeitgeist at the right time. What say you?
Well, certainly we get what I describe as a Cinderella fairy story to explain where many of these people come from. So take the Beatles, for example. The pervading myth with that group is that they were four regular working class lads from Liverpool who just happened to put together a band, wrote a few catchy tunes, came up with a few chords and riffs, punted around a few demo tapes, and just struck it lucky. You know, got this mega deal with EMI Records and just happened to blow up and just happened to become the biggest group in music history. And then with Elvis Presley, it's a similar story in that, he's this talented lad from the South, and he was a great singer and had great musical proficiency, was discovered by Colonel Tom Parker, and he just happened to blow up. Certainly, I've not been able to discover anything in his backstory to suggest that he came from one of these important bloodline families. So there is another provision for people to make it big if they don't happen to be born into, these sort of families. And that is if they become chosen ones. So the industry has spotters whose job it is to keep an eye out for emerging talent. And if they come across somebody who they feel has a certain amount of natural musical proficiency, they're going to want them to become an asset to, first of all, sell loads of records, because to a very large extent, it is about money. Record corporations like getting rich off of other people's talent. But it's not just about making money. It's also about pushing social engineering agendas and using assets to change the mindsets of large numbers of people, change societal attitudes through social conditioning. And they use rock music stars for that. So somebody like Elvis might get made an approach and an offer, which, if they've come from relative poverty, is going to be very attractive to them. And it would take somebody of a very strong moral and mental constitution, not to mention somebody that's been able to conduct the research to discover for themselves what it is they're about to sign up to say no to a deal like that. And that's the way they ensnare a lot of these young stars. Many of them further down the line realize the true terrible nature of what it is they've got involved with. But by that point, it's pretty much too late to do anything about it. So with Elvis, I think we had someone who certainly was a great showman. He was a great singer. He was a great performer. That was recognized, and it was steered off and harnessed. Colonel Tom Parker is the guy that was put in to handle that whole process. Colonel Tom Parker, not a real colonel, by the way. He was a Dutchman who arrived in America in fairly questionable, dubious circumstances. There are big holes in his backstory, in his CV. He appears to have been a military deserter. It would appear that the controllers would have had something over Colonel Tom Parker. And possibly he was blackmailed or coerced into taking on this role in answering to these higher ups. So with artists of Elvis Presley's stature, they're never going to allow them to go their own way and pursue their own artistic vision. They're always going to want to have a handler in place. So a handler is synonymous with manager. So the acceptable public face of it is that this individual is there to handle the business interests of the artist and get them bookings and handle the liaisons with the record companies and the concert bookers and all this sort of thing. But it goes a bit further than that. What they really are is handlers, in that their role is to handle every aspect of that individual's life. including their personal life, their life away from the public spotlight, as well as what the public gets to see. And this is where we start to get into the realms of mind control of the MK Ultra variety, because a large number of very popular and prominent performers, not just musicians, but Hollywood actors, TV stars, TV presenters, anyone that's in the public spotlight, as well as politicians and business leaders, will often have been subjected to trauma-based mind control programming. And this is a way of keeping them in line, making sure the agendas get pushed, making sure they stay on script and deliver the messages, and making sure they don't go too far their own way in terms of trying to pursue a certain amount of artistic autonomy. So that's the role of handlers. Colonel Tom Parker ticked all the boxes for having been Elvis's handler. And we often get symbolic clues as to the presence of trauma-based mind control, which goes hand in hand with satanic ritual abuse. This ties into the bloodline thing, because many artists that come out of these particular families will have been subjected to satanic ritual abuse. And so the handler's role is to stay on top of that whole process.
Right. Mark, unfortunately, believe it or not, we've come to the end of our first episode together, and we're just getting into this. We will continue this in the second episode. I think this is absolutely fascinating. It's a very alternate view of something that we've taken for granted for the last 60-odd years. Tell people where they can find out more about you and where they can pick up a copy of your books.
So all 4 volumes of my Musical Truth books are on Amazon. And for anyone listening outside of the UK, Amazon is, to be honest, the most efficient way of getting hold of the books. I know not everyone likes Amazon, but if you're listening in North America, for example, it's hassle for me to mail out from the UK because often books go missing. They get seized by customs. It costs a bomb. So I would recommend that people get those from Amazon. You can look me up there, Mark Devlin, and my books are Musical Truth, volumes 1 to 4. If you're in the UK, you might want to reach out to me directly. I've got a main website, which is djmarkdevlin.com, and my email address is on the website. And there are links from there to my YouTube channel and all my various other platforms.
For now, Mark, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
No worries.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality. From ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.